Welcome guys to this instructional destination imagination video. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to solder. To start off, this is the basic element of this. This is the soldering iron. It is the most important tool of this. And then we have it in its dock, and here is the power brick, which basically just heats it up and provides power. Some of them have a temperature control, some of the cheaper ones don't. This one does. But if you don't have one, it's not that important. It should be set to the right temperature for that soldering application. So on the soldering dock, there's a sponge, which will help you clean the tip of your soldering iron. You make sure to have water on that before you get started, and then you should be good to go. This is a pair of wire strippers. They have different sized holes depending on the gauge of your wire, and you can find the gauge of your wire on most of the specifications. For example, this is 22. We'll be using the solder, this kind of solder right here, and this soldering paste to make sure there's no corrosion, and it also makes sure the components stick better. This is a wire holder. It's not the most important part of this. If you don't have one, you can absolutely get on without it. Same for the soldering paste, but it is good to have those two elements. Let's get set up and I'll show you how to do it. Now that our soldering iron is all heated up, I'm going to move the wiring holder into place and just get everything set up for us to get started. So here's the wire we'll be using today. It's 22 gauge wire. It's yellow. That's not very important, but that's the color we have today. So I'm just going to cut a few pieces and I'm going to put them in the wiring harness just so I can show you proper technique when soldering two wires together. This is the most basic process. It's just joining two wires, and it can be used in many different applications. And it'll probably be the most basic thing you'll be doing when soldering, and it'll help you get most of your basic components together. So to start off, I'm going to just strip the ends of the wire. Just like this. You put it in the right slot on your wire strippers. This is the 22 gauge slot section. Cut off about a ½ inch of wire and then pull. Then you can twist the ends, and then later we'll do something called tinning to make sure they stick together well. Here's our other piece of wire. Same thing with that. Then I'm going to twist that one up as well. Then I'll get this set up and we'll get started with tinning. So the process of tinning a wire is simple, and it just basically means you're sticking the pieces of wire together with a little bit of solder, and it just holds them all together and makes it easier later down the line, especially if you're plugging it into any components. So what I'm going to start by doing is holding the tip of the soldering iron onto one edge of the piece of wire, of the piece of exposed wire. Then you're going to follow along and wait till it heats up. Then you're going to follow along with the solder, and slowly it's going to melt on, and then you can pull that bead of solder along the edge of that wire. It'll change color a little bit, and you'll also be able to tell because it becomes a little bit more shiny usually, and you can see the solder sticking on there. I'll bring that up closer so you can see. So you can see on the bottom there's a little bead of solder. And then along the rest of it, there's a little bit more solder sticking everything together. This just keeps it all from breaking apart and destranding, which is nice in most applications. Same thing with the other piece. Just going to quickly tin that lead. And then I'll get into how you would join these two pieces of wire. So what I like to do is I like to put them base to base, most of the way down. Then you can fold one over. You're going to wrap it around on both edges, like that. And then you're going to just twist it down. I'm going to take it out of the wire harness just for the sake of this. And then you're just going to twist it together. There's a bunch of different ways you can do this, but this is a simple one, and it's easy for just a straight connection. And it's also really easy to slide any wire protectors over, any shrink wrap, any shrink tubing. Works really well with this application. So then I'm going to use some solder paste, just because we have it. It's not really necessary, especially for a component like this, but you're just going to take it on there and you're going to spread it along a little bit like that. A little goes a long way here, you don't need much, but just enough to cover it is usually plenty. Then to solder it up, I'm going to hold the tip of the soldering iron where I want to solder. And then it's going to hiss because of all the soldering paste on there. But you're just going to wait for those wires to heat up. And then since there was already solder on the tip of my iron, it already spread to the wires. But if that wasn't enough, you can also just dot on with the rest of the solder on your spool to make sure you get a thorough connection. And the trick here is make sure the wire is heated up and try to not touch the solder to the soldering iron, but instead just touch it to the wire where it's hot, because then it'll pull along where it needs to go, and you'll end up with a better result and a stronger finish. So that was obviously more solder than we needed just so I could explain. But there you have it, if my camera will focus. There you are. And for example, it's a strong connection. It's not just going to pull apart. I am pulling with most of the force I can get, and it's not coming apart. There you have it. Thank you.